Okay, hi, welcome back. So, heads up, this one is going to be a little bit heavier. Um, a lot more trauma that we're going to be talking about, obviously. I feel like that's what the whole vibe is of this channel. But yeah, just as a heads up, last one I feel like was super, like, not super fun, but it was like funnier and a little bit lighter. So, this one is going to be a little heavier. So yeah, to recap last time, it was more lighthearted. We went over some of the fan fiction that just kind of tickled me the most that my dad made up about me. Just some of the things that I found the funniest. So yeah, so that's kind of to recap the last one. So not like going on to this next part. I was gone for a week. I left to Aruba with my partner. We were gone for a week. My family, specifically my mom, really tried to hold it down while I was gone, which I so appreciate. She did not need to do that. Obviously, it was her ex-husband, right? But my mom was like, told me, like, I don't want you to worry at all while you're gone. I want you to have a great time. I want you to enjoy yourself. And she knew that I wasn't going to be able to do that if I was worrying every 5 seconds about what was going on back at home. So it was really great that she was there for him. But a lot of that really kind of bled over, for sure. I'm back home. I made it home. While I was gone, more information also came out. My mom had spoken with another cousin uncle, who found out that my dad had lied all the way back in the day when my mom and he were still married. So, apparently, like, just something had come out about that, and just a big lie that had kind of like driven a wedge between us and him for a long time. And it was a really big bummer because I super loved this uncle. I was really my dad lived with him for a little bit right after my parents divorced, and every time I'd go over to stay at their, like, to try to stay with him, because they had split custody towards the beginning of when they first broke up, or they first divorced, I would go over there and try to spend like a day on the weekend with them whenever he was free or had the time. And when I'd go over there, my uncle was awake. He was there. He would play with me. We would watch movies. I watched Recess, the movie, for the first time over there. Like, he taught me how to draw and gave me a real interest in art and things like that. But the second that he would go to sleep, I started to feel kind of unsafe again. And, anyone who's grown up with trauma, like, seeing a person in that way doesn't just erase overnight and disappear, just because it's a different circumstance, a different setting. So I was never really comfortable being with him by myself. And so in hindsight, looking back at that, I really think that the reason why, because I never stayed the night there, it would just be him and I, and I'd be in his room with him. And I just couldn't sleep. I just had the hardest time sleeping. So always ended up calling my mom. She'd come pick me up in the middle of the night, and take me back home, because I just I didn't feel comfortable there by myself with him. Yeah, so we found out a lot of lies, though, with that cousin uncle. And it just really broke both my mom and my heart, because, she really loved him too, had a lot of love for him. Like, and it just seemed like a really weird division for a long time, and we didn't know why. And my dad was very quick to be like, oh, well, you know how it is, like he can just be like that sometimes, like, yeah, no, he just doesn't like you, and would say things like that to my mom, and would say things like that even to me. And so we didn't push, because, it's like, who wants to push when it's uncomfortable, it's awkward, like, why would I go and try to follow up with that person? And so, we found out all these things that, like, he had kind of done the same thing to him on the opposite side. And so he never tried to reconnect and reach out to us either. So we were very separate for a really long time, which was just really kind of awful to think about and to hear. And that uncle also had, like, a lot of medical problems, a lot of health issues, and was in the hospital. And I didn't really know the full extent of all of that stuff either. And anytime I check in with my dad about it, he would just be like, oh no, he's fine. Or some of that time Dad and I were estranged, so, like, we weren't really talking. But yeah, so, like, it's crazy, because, like, I didn't even know some of that stuff was going on with him. I'm not on social media, really. I'm not on Facebook or anything, so I didn't really know. And my dad never told me. So, that whole time he really kind of had to suffer out there by himself, and my dad would just make up excuses why he couldn't come or whatever. And again, never never bothered to share that with my mom or I, because my mom and I would have gone down there. So it just really kind of drove a wedge between us and the family. And I started to think to myself, because my mom was telling me all this when I came back home, and I started to think to myself, like, who else did he do that with? Like, what else has he told other people or not told other people? You know, I just started to really think about that and started to approach the way that I spoke to everyone a little bit differently, because I felt like my assumptions about things weren't necessarily, you know, like somebody treats you in a certain way, but it's like, why are they treating you that way? And I never really stopped to think about it like that. I never stopped to think like, oh, there might be a third influence here. My dad saying something or telling them something that would be making them act that type of way. So I'd never really thought about that before. So it started to kind of like change my opinion as I moved forward. Anyway, so I went to the hospital right off and spent the whole day there with him. I spent my days there at the hospital. I was there day in and day out from the morning all the way until the evening. I would be trying to get work done and he would just not permit it. It was really frustrating. It was super frustrating. He insisted that I hold his hand the whole time. And mind you, he's not in critical anymore. He's not in intensive care anymore. He's, you know, he's like the step down from that. So it's like, but he still was just like, no, hold my hand. And so I'd hold his hand the whole time I was there, and he'd literally be falling asleep most of the time that I would be in there. And I kept trying to put like, hey, you want to put TV on? No, I just want to sit here in the quiet. And so it's like, it was really awkward. It was really weird. But I would just go there and sit with him. And he'd start to fall asleep while I was holding his hand. And so I'd pull my laptop out while he was falling asleep. I was still holding his hand, pull my laptop out, and I would try to start working, because like I have things to do, you know. I'm sitting here at the hospital all day long, every day during the weekdays. Like I have work, I have things that I'm supposed to be doing, I have responsibilities. And every time I would pull my laptop out at all to start working, and he's falling asleep, mind you, again, he is totally falling asleep, in and out snoring, I'm still holding his hand. Anytime I tried to pull my laptop out and start working, he would suddenly wake up, and then he would intentionally start messing around with things so I would stop working. So he would like start messing with the bed buttons. He would start like, you know, like trying to like lift himself up in these weird positions and turn himself sideways. And like he was doing all these weird things to like intentionally get me to stop working. Because I'd be like, stop doing that. Stop pushing the call button. Stop pushing the buttons to move the bed around. I was telling him to stop doing it, and he would kind of laugh because he was getting a kick out of it. And I think I mentioned this before. He really liked to irritate me. He loved to frustrate me. So I'm sitting there like trying to get work done, and he's sitting there like doing things on purpose just to get a rise out of me. And I'm like, bro, I'm trying to get stuff done. So I was getting really frustrated because he kept, again, messing around with the bed, messing around with anything he had. He kept throwing things on the floor and dropping things. And it was just really like weird behavior. But he was kind of like that sometimes. Not like when I think about it in hindsight, like, you know, if he wasn't the center of attention or he was out of control or whatever. There was even a time, like he honestly just loved to see me jump and run to attention. There was even a time I was out in the hallway talking to his girlfriend, and they were like changing him in the room or something like that. I don't remember. Or they were like taking blood or something, and I was like, okay, we're gonna step out because the rooms are small. It's gonna get crowded. So we would just step out for a second. And we were in the hallway talking, and he like yelled my name. And so I ran in there. I was like, what's wrong? And he's like, oh, I just wanted to introduce you to this person. And it was like this weird moment where like, and the nurse was super uncomfortable too. And we were all just kind of like, okay, so you literally just wanted to see how fast I'd run in here. And he's like, yeah. And it's so like for him, it was all about kind of like those power dynamics. Like he loved the fact that like he had me at the snap of a finger, because I don't think he'd had that probably ever. Like I don't think he's ever had that in general, but especially with me, he's never had that. So for him, he was like, he loved that newfound power, and he used it whenever he could. He'd call me at like 6 or 7 in the morning, and anyone who knows me knows I am not a morning person. Do not dare to call me before 8 o'clock. Okay, don't even bother trying to call me before 8 o'clock. But he'd be sitting there calling me 6 or 7 in the morning, and I tell him, I can't believe you had the nerve to call me that early. Don't call me that early. And he'd do it again. And it was over stupid things. It wasn't like it was anything important. He would just be telling me like just kind of dumb things. Or he would be like, he would lie and he'd be like, oh, they're moving me today. Like, and I'd be like, what do you mean they're moving you today? Yeah, they're moving me into a rehab facility today. They're supposed to call and let me know that first, because I'm your first, like, I need to know this information. So, no, I don't think so. Yeah, they're discharging me today. No, they can't just discharge you, because that, like, they're not going to just kick you out and, like, put you in the front and you're going to be waiting there. Like, that's not a thing. But he'd be calling me just, like, whatever excuse he could to use to call me early in the morning. And so again, sometimes it was just over stupid stuff, but a lot of it was stuff he would just kind of make up. And so then and it's like, you didn't think I would call? Like, so obviously I'm not going to just rush down there. So I just call the nurse's station and I'm like, hi. And they probably got super annoyed with me. They're like, what is going on with this girl? Because I kept calling and being like, he said he started this medication. Is that true? No, he didn't start that medication. He's saying that, he's getting moved out of here and they're moving him, they're discharging him today. Is that true? No, that's not true. So I felt kind of bad for the nurse's station, because I kept calling them and asking questions. Anyway, yeah, so he'd call me at 6 or 7 in the morning. I'd come in, a little later than that. And then he wouldn't let me leave until he fell asleep. Anyway, so yeah, all of this stuff was happening. He had a lot of anxieties going on. Isolation was a really big problem for him. He felt super lonely, which is why I think he wanted me there as long as possible. And he would wait and try to stall me until, his sleep medications came or whatever else, his CPAP machine came. And then, yeah, so that was all happening. I was working with medical, trying to figure out the insurance thing, talking to his caseworkers like every 5 seconds, which was so exhausting. And, the caseworkers calling and asking me questions. And again, it was like anytime they would go and talk with him, like he was not giving them the right answer. So it's like I really felt like I needed to be there because he wasn't asking his doctors the right questions. I'd be like, why are you on this medication? He'd say, I don't know. And it's like, you have to follow up for yourself. You are your own best medical advocate. And he was not advocating for himself. He wanted me to do all the advocating for him. So I was really there, again, from like sun up to sundown, trying to get this stuff done, and trying to figure out what the next steps were. I was really frustrated. I was very exhausted. I was not getting a lot of sleep. And honestly, I was like super not taking care of myself. And it's not for a lack of my friends and family trying and telling me, hey, you need to take care of yourself. Because all of them did. Every single one of them was like, did you eat today? Are you drinking water? Like they were all really on me about it. And I just wasn't. I just was not making that a priority. I did not make myself a priority. And that's just not a good thing, but this is also when things start to get kind of weird. Okay, so I mentioned a lot of the other medical stuff, which is kind of probably boring to some people, but yeah, so this is when things start to get really weird. So I was sitting there again with him for hours, and he's starting to have hallucinations. He was having hallucinations apparently while I was gone, but when I was there the week that he was out, like in the ICU, he didn't have any hallucinations. He wasn't having any hallucinations at all. And all of a sudden, while I was gone, he started to have hallucinations. And people were like telling me, oh yeah, he thought he saw Barbie in the corner. And he thinks there's kids that are in the rafters. And, he told us he was sleeping in a lion's cage. And he's saying all these crazy things and having hallucinations. And, I'm trying to figure out, like, what is that coming from? Is that true? Which sounds really bad, but, like, again, he's had a really complicated relationship with the truth in the past, so I don't know what to believe. I'm like, are you making this stuff up? Like, are you, like, actively making it up because it gets you sympathy and it makes you interesting? Or are you genuinely, like, seeing these things and hallucinating? Like... And it was like, I wasn't sure. I still to this day don't know, because like there were sometimes he seemed very lucid, and then like certain people would walk in and then he'd instantly start talking about hallucination stuff. And I was like, it was really weird. Like with me, when it was just he and I, he was super normal. And then like my mom would walk in the room and then he'd start talking about the little girl who was sitting in the corner. And it was like, so I wasn't sure, again, if he was genuinely seeing these things or if he was just making it up for attention. And I still don't know. So, I'm talking to the nurses because I'm like, what could cause this? Like, is this permanent? Is this a medication side effect? Like, what is this? And the nurses are saying, oh, he started an anti-seizure medication, and the anti-seizure medication has that as a side effect. And I'm like, does he need to be on the anti-seizure medication? Because he hasn't had a seizure. So, like he's not had a seizure at all. He has no symptoms of seizures. So why is he even on that? And they couldn't really give me a straight answer. They're giving me the runaround and telling me I need to contact the neurologist. I'm trying to contact the neurologist. I even called his office. Still to this day, never got a call back. No matter what. And if he was making his rounds on the floor, he was supposed to call me while he was there. Never called me. My dad never asked, which I like. Anyway, it was a lot, and I was very frustrated by all of that, but I couldn't tell if he was hallucinating, like if he was actually hallucinating or if he was just making it up. So things started to get kind of weird because he would occasionally just kind of slip weird things in there. Also, his girlfriend starts to act kind of weird during this time. She starts getting really distant with me. I'm texting her, like she would be texting me something and asking me questions, and she'd get really flat with me, like just very like, one word answers, periods, like very just like very distant and flat in her messages. And I can't blame her, because again, if I had had that happen to me where like I had all this information, like and I found out all this lies and everything, like I probably would have done the same thing. But my pop was really insistent that they were working it out and that he was going to marry her. He kept telling, us and like anybody who come in, oh yeah, I'm going to marry her, blah, 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 blah. And so I'm thinking like, okay, so she tried to distance herself because she doesn't want to hurt him. Like, I get it, like she doesn't want to hurt him while he's in this state. But it's also kind of hurting him worse because she's not directly telling him like, no, we need to not be together because, or at least he didn't interpret it that way. He never interpreted it that way. He kept being very emphatic to everyone that he was going to marry her. But at this point, his girlfriend's kind of doing, like, I was calling it back then the hokey pokey. She had one foot in and she had one foot out. She kept taking my dad's phone, and she would tell us that too. Like, oh, I'm taking his phone because I want to delete messages, or I'm taking his phone because of X, Y, and Z. And she had his wallet and she had his phone. And she wasn't really bringing it back when we would ask for it back. And it was just kind of weird. And she had his key, like a key to his apartment, and like, it was a whole thing. And so like, I kept feeling like, well, having one foot in and one foot out is not helping him. It's not helping him because it makes him feel like you still care because you keep showing up for him and you keep taking his things. So you now have an emotional tie to him still. Like, this is not the action of somebody who is trying to extricate themselves from somebody's life. Like, those are not the actions of someone who's trying to do that. And my uncle, when I was talking to him about it, he'd just say, I asked her if she still loves him at the beginning of this, and she said yes. And he's like, and I think that's why she's staying. And so, I kind of agreed with him. I was like, you're probably right. Like, she probably doesn't know how to let him go. And so she has one foot in and one foot out. And I just kept hoping that she'd kind of come to her senses and realize that this was really toxic for her, that this was not healthy for her. Because again, at this point, like, we'd become, I'd say, somewhat friends, like we were pretty friendly with each other, and I liked her. And so, it was like, I felt really sorry for her because I was like, I could tell you're stuck in this toxic cycle. You really need to get out of it though, because like, it's not helping anyone. This isn't helping anyone. So anyway, that was a long way of saying all of that. But yeah, so it was really kind of weird. But he consumed my days at this point. And if I took a break, like from going to the hospital, which like wasn't often, but if I took a break, it was because I was going to do something. So mind you, I am an introvert, okay? But it may not seem like it, but I am an introvert. When people meet me, they're like, oh no, you're totally extroverted. No, if I am in a space where I'm meeting a ton of new people and I'm around a lot of people, I can be super gregarious. I can be super friendly. I love talking to people and getting to know them and things like that. But like, I go home and take a vow of silence for like 24 hours. I don't want to talk to anybody. After like a big event, after talking to a lot of people and meeting a lot of people, like I need silence and I just need to sleep because I'm so like emotionally spent after something like that. So very introverted. And so like me doing that was really not good. Like I was not actually getting any rest at all. I was super exhausted. But while I was there with him in the hospital, you know, we would joke a lot. We would joke. We were clowning on each other. Like that's, you know, how we would do things. Like we were very much like that. And I've mentioned that a few times before where like humor was very important to us. So we were joking, clowning, but, and you know, there were some serious moments that were really interspersed in there. And I'd say, not the good kind, like really not the good kind. I started to really feel a lot of resentment. So one of the things that really caused a lot of resentment with me was my, one of my other cousin uncles, another one, who lives closer by. He would come and visit, and he came with his wife one day, and my dad, you know, he's talking to my uncle and everything, and my uncle like loves my dad. I've never really had a lot of experiences with him, especially like when I was older. But I already loved him too. Like he was so kind and so welcoming to me. I was really nervous my first time meeting some of that family because my dad really kept me away from a lot of my Polynesian family, and he made me feel really uncomfortable going around them. Like I was gonna screw something up and like offend them in some way. Like he would purposely, you know, try to throw things in there like, oh, like, see, you don't even know these basic words. Like, you know, like they're not gonna accept you. Like you're always gonna be hapakasi, you know, which means like half someone. So like I just always felt really uncomfortable. But he was great. He was super welcoming. So he's sitting there with his wife, and we're all just chatting and whatever else. And my dad, they're talking about, you know, just like illness and stuff. And I thanked him for coming. I thanked my uncle for coming and being there with my dad. And my dad was like, see, honey, the thing you have to understand is if one of us goes down, one of us Sega men go down, then the other ones pick up and take care of the rest of the family. They take care of the family. Like, it's like, you know, like we're the ones who are taking the kids to soccer games, and we're the ones who are checking in on the wife and making sure that they're okay. And when he said that, you know, I looked at my uncle, and he's like nodding his head like he agreed. And this really triggered something in me. It made me really upset, actually. Like I started to get really angry and resentful after he said that, because so like when I was growing up, two things. One, my mom got in a very severe car accident. I think I mentioned this before. She broke her neck. She was in a really bad car accident. During this time, because I was in the car accident with her, so I was in a lot of pain also, but I didn't break my neck. I had to be pulled out of school because I was in so much pain. Like I was just dealing with like, yeah, I needed to get up and stretch. I was supposed to get up and stretch like every 30 minutes, which isn't always feasible in the 4th grade. You know, like your teachers are a little bit more strict, especially back then. They were not really accommodating. And so I was like having literally like chronic migraines and everything from this car accident. If it was bad enough to break my mom's neck, that should tell you everything you need to know. So I actually had to get pulled from school, and I started to do homeschooling because that was really bad. But on top of that, we didn't have a car anymore. And so my mom and I, and specifically my mom, was in and out of doctor's appointments, and she was in so much pain she could barely hold her head up some days. So I'm sitting there trying to pick up all the slack in the house because my Nana's at work. She's working all day trying to keep our household afloat and trying to make sure that we have a place to live. You know, she's securing that side. So I was home, you know, trying to make sure food was prepared. I would sit there and hold my mom because she'd be sobbing because she's in so much pain. I'm sitting there, you know, again, in the doctor's waiting rooms, and we did not have a car. So we're walking, you know, in the pouring down rain to bus stops, and we're taking the bus to places. We're trying to, you know, do whatever we can. And I just remember I remember my galoshes. I had these like rain galoshes that were hideous, and they would just get filled. Like one time they got filled with water because it was raining so hard outside. And my mom, we had gotten like halfway to the bus stop, and like I was in a lot of pain. She was in a lot of pain. We were both completely soaked. And she was like, just forget it. I'm going to cancel the appointment. We're going back home. Like literally just went back home because it was just so bad. So like, you know, I'm thinking about all these times that things like that were happening. And I was pretty much alone. Like my dad was nowhere to be found. He was not trying to pick up the slack and help. I'd like confirmed this with my mom. He was not trying to pick up the slack and help. He never paid child support. So like we didn't have additional funds to pay for anything else. So Like, you know, I'm struggling, we're struggling financially, we're struggling physically, and all these other things. And for all intents and purposes, we were alone. Like I was pretty isolated during that time, trying to do all that stuff. And then, and I want to say I was 9. I think I was like 9 years old or something, because it was the 4th grade. So I was thinking I was like 9 or 10. So, you know, I'm dealing with all this stuff at a really young age. I feel completely isolated. I never once did it dawn on me to ask a family member for help. And I remember we asked Dad if we could borrow his car a couple times, and he was so like rude about it, and he made it like a really big thing. And it was like he made it like a really big thing anytime we would ask to borrow his car, and like, and to the point where we were like, you know, it's not worth it, like don't worry about it. And then like additionally, also another thing was like I have and had a bleeding disorder that I have had and was struggling with when I was like younger. I had a really bad bleeding disorder. It was a lot worse when I was younger than it is now, where I'd have like chronic bloody noses. I'd be sitting there, you know, with a bloody nose that would last like an hour and a half. Like I was having all sorts of very severe medical issues. I was a patient at Children's Hospital. You know, they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and like I was having clotting issues. Like I was exhausted. I had chronic exhaustion. I bruised really easily. Like it was a really scary time. And I was in the, you know, like in the hematology center, which is like kind of like mostly kids with cancer and stuff. And so I'm sitting there, I think I was like 13, like 12 and 13 during this time. And, you know, having a lot of existential thoughts, because you're around kids who are there one day and then the next day they're gone. And I'm sitting there like, is that going to happen to me? Like, is that like, I'm thinking of all these things, and, you know, I'm finding out all these really hard things too. Like they're telling me, oh, you're not going to be able to have kids because of this bleeding disorder. Like I'm finding this out at a young age. Like I'm struggling with all of these things. And he was not there at all. He never took me to any doctor's appointments. He never, you know, never really checked in. He never asked me like, hey, how are you feeling? Hey, how's that going? You know, are you having a hard day? Like he never was there for like any of that stuff. And like, it was just my mom and I, and at the time she had a job, like she was able to heal with her broken neck and stuff. It was a couple years later. And so she had a job at this point. We had a car now. But it was really hard. Like it was still really hard to afford stuff, and like, and she'd have to take off work so we could go down to LA, like, which is a far drive in the morning. And, you know, it was just a lot. It was a lot to deal with. And he was really not present for any of that. So I'm sitting there, I'm sorry to have trauma dumped all of that on you, but I'm sitting there like hearing him say that about, you know, oh, we pick up and we take care of it. And I'm like, where were you when I was struggling with all of that stuff and I really could have used a support system? Like, did you even know? Did you know that I was dealing, like, did you, like, and I'm sitting there, like, trying to, like, process all of this and just getting so frustrated and really, like, upset and, again, very angry, like, very resentful and angry, because it's, like, I struggled hard, like, and to this day, I struggle with, like, a lot of things, like even just, again, relying on people, like telling people that something's wrong in the first place, because it was like, we didn't have time to sit there and wallow. We just had to like pick up and figure it out. And so it's like, I still struggle with that to this day, like letting people in, but even just feeling like close with family, like I can trust them to be there for those things, because like they really weren't, like they were not there. They weren't, you know, offering assistance and stuff. And so it's like, even now with my dad having passed, like, you know, they're offering help and stuff. And I'm just like it's weird to me, because like I grew up not having that support system at all. And so it's like, I'm so incredibly grateful for it now, but like I just am not used to having it. Anyway, so yeah, so that was one thing that really, really made me very resentful and very upset. But another thing was the fact that he kept telling nurses that he paid for my schooling. And he kept telling people, and he made this like offhanded comment to me, like I'd said something. And then he's like, yeah, well, you weren't complaining about that when it paid for your education. Like he made some comment like that. And I just looked at him and was like, you paid for my what? What did you paid for my what? Like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You didn't pay for a single minute of my education, like, at all. You didn't even pay child support. So, like, you're really sitting here telling all these nurses, and the nurses would be like, oh, well, like, they would be making comments about how he paid for my stuff, and they'd be making comments about stuff. So I'm like, so you're lying to these nurses still. You're lying to people still, and telling them all these things about me in the hospital. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, you know that we know stuff, and you have this whole new second chance, and you're still lying. Like, you're still lying about this. Like, are you kidding me? I come in here every single day, and I am here for hours at a time, and you're gonna have the nerve to do that? Like, you're gonna have the nerve to, like, are you serious? Like, I was very, very upset. I was livid that he said that, and I was very quick to correct him in front of everybody in that room, which he very much did not like, but I did not care, because I was like, absolutely not. You did not pay for my education. I was the one who went out and got scholarships. I was the one who took student loans out. My mom helped me and did the same thing. He never put his neck out there for any of that. He's not even like he doesn't even have like one of those Parent Plus loans, like nothing. He was not a part of that at all. And so really, really, really frustrating, very upsetting. And so I had finally confronted him about some of this. I finally, sat him down, like, well, not sat, he was already sat, but I finally sat down and just said, you're gonna have a lot of bridges that you're gonna need to mend when you leave this hospital. And he was like, oh, I know, well, I already talked to my girlfriend about it, some of the stuff, and we already addressed stuff, about lying and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, not just her. And he kind of looked at me, and he was like, who? And I said, well, I think you're going to have to find that out for yourself. I'm not going to sit there and give you cheat notes, on to who you need to go apologize to for what. Like, you need to apologize to everybody. And that's kind of what I said to him. And I'm like, but dude, like, you even need to apologize to my partner. And he was like, what? I'm like, you really sat there and lied and told people that my partner was lazy and wouldn't fix anything around my house, which we don't have together. And I can't believe you said that about him. Like, I can't believe you would say any of that stuff. And he was like, oh, well, and he was like, well, I'm sorry if I ever made you feel, made you feel bad about any of that stuff. And like, anybody who knows me knows, do not give me a bad apology. Again, that's what my research is in. Do not give me a bad apology, because I will not accept it. And I will not be graceful about it and say you're trying your best. I will not accept a bad apology. Come back and do it better. And so he kind of gave me this half-hearted apology about it. And I was like, I'm like, for what? Like, I'm like, you're sorry you made me feel what? And he was like, well, he's like, well, I'm just sorry, like, about some of that stuff, because, like, I think I lied about you because I wanted you to be enough. And I was like, okay. And I think most people probably would have gotten really upset, but I just locked in and was like, okay. I'm like, can you say more about that? And he was like, well, I just wanted you to always seem like you were more than you were. And like, that was a really hard pill to swallow. It was really hard to hear that. But like, it's understandable. And when I say it's understandable, it's because you read the fan fiction he wrote about me, and you hear all of the stories he told about me to people that, he had told some people that I owned and operated several nursing homes, and that I was able to complete somehow 3,000 hours of clinicals in 6 months, and that, I was, that I got my PhD, and that I, like, all of this stuff, like, and I did get my PhD. Some of this is true, but he interspersed in there a lot of, like, lies about things, and, like, and that I, went out and bought my own house, and that I had it all together, and I had a husband, and I had, like, and so I just think that, like, for him, like, who could ever be enough? Like, the way that he had me, like, as a character in his life, I could literally be transformed into anything he wanted at, like, the snap of a finger. I could be, like, I could be a superstar athlete. I could be, you know, a like a genius. I could do all of these different things. I could own and operate all these different things. I was running, I think he told one person that I was running something with the MLB offices, which is not true. And he would just like, he was out there telling people all of these things about me. And it's like, no one could be that. Like, literally nobody could reach that impossible standard. In the meantime, I was doing some pretty awesome things. I was doing a lot of things that I'm super proud of and a lot of things that were really great. But for him, that was never enough. And it was never going to be enough. Like, how could anything I ever did measure up to, you know, a magic wand that he could make me into whatever he needed me to be to propel his story forward. So, you know, it was really hard. Like, that was just really hard to kind of deal with and to hear. And like, but I mean, it was one of the most honest answers I think he's ever given me. And so, you know, for that, it's like, okay, like, it is what it is. But yeah, so it was really, like, that was a really hard time. I was very resentful, I think, because of those things. But honestly, I think he was just absolutely loving what he was getting in the hospital. He loved it. He loved every minute of it because he got exactly what he wanted. He had a woman who was willing to sacrifice herself for him and for his comfort. And I was, you know, literally, again, he could yell my name and I would be in there in seconds. He could call me and I would figure it out. He could complain about chest pains and I'd run out there and go get a nurse. I was sitting there arguing with doctors for him, arguing with, you know, medical system stuff. And I was sitting there, again, jumping to help him whenever I could. And I think that probably was a very addictive feeling for him. Because again, I certainly have never done that for him before. But yeah, I think I had a lot of complicated emotions during this time, you know, in some ways. And people kept telling me like, oh, it's karma. Like, your dad is getting his karma, you know? And on one hand, like, I can see why they would say that. Like, he deserved that. He kept complaining about how lonely he felt in the hospital. You know, and all those other things. Like, he was accounting for everything that he had done in his hospital stay. You know, he was in there because of bad lifestyle choices that he had made, right? Like, he was in the hospital as a direct result of things that he had done over his lifetime. But being alone in the hospital, you know, like, he was in the hospital alone and, you know, feeling abandoned and scared. And I just, again, feel like that's, you know, like, same. So did I, you know, and so did my uncle. And even like back to like the day that I was born, like, my mom, literally, she had me and my dad was late to pick us up at the hospital by like hours. So my mom's literally sitting out front, like, waiting for my dad to come pick us up with a baby in her arms, like me. Like, that was like from the beginning. And so it's like, you know, like, I just think about that, like, being alone in the hospital, feeling abandoned, feeling scared. And it's like, you aren't alone. I'm literally here all day long. You have people who are checking in on you all day long. And it was never, like, again, it was just never enough. But it was like, he was still kind of dealing with that karma. And he just felt really uncertain in his relationship with his girlfriend. I'm sure a lot of his girlfriends have felt that way with him before, because he would say one thing, but he'd do another. So I'm sure a lot of them felt really uncertain in their relationship with him too. So, you know, all of this was like, literally, like, step for step, like, you could draw a direct, like, string from point A to point B of how he's accounting for something he had done in the past. But like, that doesn't feel good to watch, you know, it doesn't feel good to watch him pay for it. And like, that's the thing, is I think most people are like, oh, I can't wait to see you get what's coming to you. Like, it actually hurt a lot. Like, I'm sitting there watching him account for these things and having these very real and human emotions. And it's like, it's actually really painful and hard to get through, watching him deal with that. And all I can do at that point is like hope that he learns from it. I just keep hoping that he's going to be able to learn from it and that it's going to make him into a better person. You know, he would say, I don't have any friends. And I would say, why do you think that is? You know, like, I don't have any friends. Why do you think that is? Why do you think no one's coming and visiting you in the hospital? Now we know why. But at the time, it was like, well, I don't know why that is, you know. And then he would say to me, you know, I'm afraid that every time you leave, I'm afraid you're not going to come back. And I'd say, well, why do you think that is? What do you think that that's stemming from that's making you feel that way? I kept trying to kind of guide him to some sort of like aha moment, and he wasn't taking it. He just was not taking it. Like anytime I would ask him that, he would give me some BS about, well, I just think I'm too giving, and I think that I care too much, and I never took care of myself. And it's like, no, that's not what this is. Like, I don't think that's the lesson you're supposed to take away from this. But, you know, and he would joke about, because I tell him, you really need to see a therapist. Like, I was being very direct at this point, because I was like, dude, this is not helping anybody. Like, you need help. You need to see a therapist. And he would sit there and joke about, oh, no, I don't want to talk to one of those therapists because, you know, I can always out-talk them. If they come in here, you know, they'll get mad and frustrated real quick because I'll always out-talk them, and then they won't get anything from me. And I just looked at him and I was like, you understand that's not the flex that you think it is, right? And he was like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, you're not getting help. And you're intentionally admitting the fact that, like, if someone comes in to try to help you, you would rather, you get more of a kick and a thrill out of duping them than actually getting the help that you need, which is a really weird thing to be proud of. Like, that's not something to be proud of. That's not actually a good thing. That's actually a really bad thing. And it was funny because he looked at me like, oh, like, no one's ever said that to me before. And I'm like, literally, like, you are around people that I'm sure you're recommending to go to therapy all the time. You need to go to therapy and actually, like, be real and honest with the therapist and not try to trick them into whatever it is. Like, not try to pull them into one of your lies. Like, it was just so bizarre. It was really, really weird, and it was really frustrating, and it was really painful to watch. And so, yeah, so it was just like, that was just really hard to watch because, you know, again, I'm sitting here watching him struggle with all these things, and I'm like, oh my God, like, please just, like, please make the right choice for once. Like, please make, like, and it just, every time I tried to give, and I've mentioned this before, anytime I try to give him the benefit of the doubt, it always comes back to bite me. Anytime I tried to hope that something would change and that he would make a better decision, it always came back to bite me because it was never going to materialize. It just never was. So yeah. Anyway, that was a really long video. I think I'm probably going to I'm going to cut it here. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Please remember to keep an open mind and be kind, because the truth will follow behind.